What if I told you the medieval world, a time shrouded in myth, superstition, and long-forgotten secrets, is finally giving up its mysteries, not through dusty scrolls or crumbling ruins, but through the cutting-edge tools of modern science? Across centuries, countless questions lingered like ghosts. How did ancient builders achieve the impossible? What hidden messages lie beneath the surface of legendary artifacts, and what really happened in those shadowy chapters of history where records faded into silence? Today, we're standing at the most thrilling crossroads of all, where the past meets technology in ways that would have stunned even the brightest minds of the Middle Ages. In this video, we're diving into 25 jaw-dropping cases where science cracked codes, decoded legends, and rewrote history itself. Picture this: a team of researchers pointing lasers at a 700-year-old castle wall, revealing invisible ink left by a long-dead prisoner. Or imagine DNA extracted from a knight's skeletal remains, unraveling a bloodline thought lost to time. These aren't scenes from a fantasy novel, they're real breakthroughs happening right now. From the strange stains on medieval manuscripts that turned out to be traces of banned potions, to the hidden chambers beneath cathedrals uncovered by ground-penetrating radar, science is pulling back the curtain on stories we thought we'd never fully understand. And the revelations, they're stranger, darker, and more magnificent than anything scribes could have dreamed up. This journey isn't just about solving puzzles, it's about hearing the whispers of history in a whole new way. Every discovery peels back another layer, showing us how much we still have to learn from the past. So whether you're a history buff, a science lover, or just someone who craves a good mystery, you're about to witness something extraordinary. Because when you mix medieval enigmas with 21st century technology, the results don't just surprise us, they change everything we thought we knew. Ready to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? Let's begin. For centuries, the Voynich Manuscript stood as the ultimate puzzle, a book written in an alphabet no one could read, filled with bizarre illustrations of plants that didn't seem to exist. Scholars, cryptographers, even codebreakers from World War II took their shot at deciphering it, only to walk away baffled. The pages whispered secrets just out of reach, taunting historians with their strange symbols and uncanny diagrams. But then came artificial intelligence, armed with algorithms that could analyze patterns no human eye could detect. Researchers fed the manuscript's text into machine learning systems trained on hundreds of languages, both ancient and modern. What emerged was astonishing. The writing wasn't pure gibberish or an elaborate hoax, as some had suspected. Instead, it appeared to be a complex hybrid of encoded Latin, medieval Hebrew, and even traces of early Romance dialects scrambled together with deliberate obfuscation. The AI detected recurring structures like prefixes and suffixes found in known languages, hidden beneath layers of intentional distortion. Even more fascinating, those eerie botanical drawings weren't pure fantasy. Cross-referencing them with historical herbals, scientists realized many were stylized versions of real medicinal plants, their features exaggerated or combined, possibly to conceal their identities from prying eyes. The manuscript might have been a pharmacopoeia, a coded guide to remedies so valuable its author went to extraordinary lengths to keep it secret. Suddenly, the text's reputation as an indecipherable curiosity flipped. It wasn't meaningless at all, but a meticulously crafted vault of knowledge waiting for the right key. And that key turned out to be the very thing its creator could never have imagined: machines capable of seeing through centuries of linguistic camouflage. The Voynich Manuscript's defenses, formidable against human minds, finally met their match in artificial intelligence. What was once dismissed as an elaborate medieval prank now stands as proof that even the most stubborn historical riddles aren't safe from modern science's relentless curiosity. The Winchester Mystery House has long been a magnet for ghost stories, with its twisting hallways leading nowhere, staircases ascending into ceilings, and doors opening onto blank walls. For over a century, tales swirled that Sarah Winchester, the rifle heiress who obsessed over its construction, designed it this way to confuse vengeful spirits. But when engineers and tree-ring scientists turned their tools on the mansion, they uncovered a truth far more fascinating than any paranormal legend. Using dendrochronology, the study of tree growth rings in wooden beams, researchers pinpointed exact years different sections were built. The patterns revealed something startling. The house wasn't deliberately maze-like from the start. Instead, it grew in chaotic bursts, with whole wings added or demolished in rapid succession. Some haunted features, like a staircase terminating at the ceiling, were simply abandoned mid-construction when plans changed. The real driving force wasn't ghosts, but Sarah's relentless, almost compulsive need to keep building. Structural scans showed something even more telling. The mansion's infamous oddities, doors opening to walls, windows built into floors, often aligned with earlier versions of the house. As rooms were demolished or repurposed, remnants of past layouts remained frozen in place like architectural ghosts. The so-called spirit traps were really just scars of constant renovation, a physical diary of one woman's unending project. Even the house's famous seance room, long rumored to be where Sarah communed with the dead, was added decades after construction began, a theatrical flourish, not the heart of the design. But the biggest revelation came from engineering analysis. The mansion's bewildering floor plan wasn't random. It followed a loose but deliberate logic. Corridors zigzagged to maximize natural light in an era before electric lighting was reliable. Oddly placed doors often led to servants' passages, hidden for discretion. What seemed like supernatural nonsense was, in many cases, pragmatic design filtered through decades of haphazard changes. Sarah wasn't building a ghost labyrinth. She was crafting a living, evolving home, one blueprint at a time. Science didn't just debunk the myths, it gave us a portrait of a real woman, grieving and restless, shaping her world one renovation at a time. The Winchester House isn't a monument to the supernatural, but to something far more human, the unstoppable urge to create, even when the reasons themselves get lost to history. For 4 centuries, the lost colony of Roanoke haunted history books as America's oldest cold case. In 1587, over 100 English settlers vanished from their fledgling village, leaving behind only a single cryptic clue, the word Croatoan carved into a post. Theories spiraled over generations. Had they been massacred? Did they attempt sailing home only to vanish at sea? Or had they simply walked into the wilderness, never to be seen again? Recent breakthroughs in genetic science and archaeological chemistry finally dragged this mystery into the light, and the truth was hiding in the soil all along. Forensic soil analysis at the Roanoke site uncovered something startling: patches of earth with chemical signatures unlike anything native to the area. Traces of lead, tin, and other metals matched precisely with Elizabethan-era English pottery glazes. These weren't random deposits, they marked where settlers' belongings had once decomposed into the ground. But here's the twist. The scattering pattern showed these items weren't abandoned in haste. They'd been carefully dismantled and moved piece by piece, suggesting a deliberate relocation rather than a violent end. Then came the DNA bombshell. Geneticists working with the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, long rumored to have ties to the colonists, made an astonishing find. Modern descendants carried rare European genetic markers dating back to the late 16th century, with no record of other English contact in the region during that period. One particular family line even preserved an oral tradition about grandfathers who came from across the water, passed down through generations. The genetic timeline aligned perfectly with the colony's disappearance. Archaeologists added another layer to the story by analyzing tree growth rings from the period. A severe drought struck the Carolina coast in the exact years the colonists vanished, explaining why they might have sought help from the Croatoan people whose name was carved on that fateful post. Far from being a distress signal, the carving was likely a destination marker telling searchers where they'd gone. The settlers didn't disappear, they integrated, surviving through the generosity of the very communities later history tried to erase. Science peeled back the layers of this enigma to reveal not a tragedy, but a story of adaptation and unlikely alliances. The lost colonists were right where they said they'd be all along. We just needed new tools to listen. In the sweltering summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg became the stage for one of history's strangest epidemics, not of disease but of dance. Hundreds of people, seemingly possessed, twirled and convulsed for days without rest, some collapsing or even dying from exhaustion. For centuries, the event was chalked up to divine punishment or demonic influence. But modern science has peeled back the layers of this macabre spectacle, revealing a cocktail of biological and psychological factors that turned a medieval city into a nightmarish dance floor. The first clue came from toxicology. Historians studying grain storage records noticed a pattern. Damp conditions that year created the perfect breeding ground for ergot, a fungus that grows on rye. When ingested, ergot produces alkaloids strikingly similar to LSD, triggering hallucinations, muscle spasms, and uncontrollable movements. Sound familiar? Victims of ergot poisoning, documented in other outbreaks, exhibited eerily similar symptoms to the Strasbourg dancers. But here's the twist: not everyone in the city was affected. That's where mass hysteria research enters the picture. Psychologists studying collective behavior identified a phenomenon called psychogenic movement disorder, where extreme stress or trauma manifests as involuntary physical actions. Strasbourg in 1518 was a pressure cooker of famine, disease, and superstition. When a few people, possibly suffering from ergotism, began dancing, the combination of fear, religious fervor, and social contagion spread the behavior like wildfire. Eyewitness accounts describe crowds egging dancers on, believing purification through movement would break the curse. The more people joined, the more the frenzy fed itself, a vicious cycle of physiological triggers and psychological amplification. Modern brain imaging studies shed even more light. In heightened emotional states, the mirror neuron system responsible for empathy and imitation goes into overdrive. This neural wiring, meant to help us bond, can also turn distress into a collective physical response. Add the era's limited medical knowledge, where authorities prescribed dancing it out as a cure, and the tragedy was all but guaranteed. What began as a toxic accident became a perfect storm of biology and belief. The dancing plague wasn't supernatural, it was a terrifying preview of how easily the human mind and body can spiral together under the right conditions. Science didn't just solve a medieval mystery, it revealed a timeless lesson about the fragile boundary between physiology and psychology, one that still resonates in an age of viral trends and social media frenzies. The Mary Celeste has haunted maritime lore since 1872, when this ghost ship was found drifting near the Azores, completely intact with cargo untouched but not a soul aboard. For over a century, wild theories flourished: pirate attacks, sea monsters, even alien abductions. But modern science has peeled back the layers of this nautical enigma, revealing far more plausible and terrifying explanations hidden in the ship's very construction and the ocean's fickle moods. Maritime archaeologists examining the Celeste's design made a crucial discovery. Its cargo hold contained barrels of denatured alcohol, a volatile industrial solvent. Gas chromatography tests revealed these barrels weren't perfectly sealed. Fumes could have leaked, creating an invisible time bomb. Crews of the era often checked for leaks by opening hatches with bare lantern flames nearby. One spark in those confined spaces could have triggered an explosion, or at least the terrifying fear of one, imagine the horror, sailors smelling fumes, seeing vapors distort the air, believing their ship was seconds from erupting. Panic would explain the orderly yet frantic abandonment, personal belongings left behind, the lifeboat meticulously lowered rather than cut away. Then there's the ocean itself. Climate scientists reconstructing Atlantic weather patterns for December 1872 identified something eerie. The Celeste's coordinates aligned perfectly with a documented rogue wave zone. These aren't normal swells, they're sudden, skyscraper-high walls of water that can slam a ship with the force of a freight train. Naval engineers modeled how such a wave might have hit the Celeste, and the results were chilling. The force could have violently shifted cargo, creating thunderous booms below deck. To a terrified crew, it might have sounded like the hull cracking apart. Worse, rogue waves often precede bizarre atmospheric effect, static electricity, making hair stand on end, sudden pressure drops distorting sounds. In an age before meteorology, sailors might have interpreted these phenomena as supernatural omens, fleeing what they believed was a cursed ship. The final nail in the pirate theory came from forensic accounting. The Celeste's cargo manifest showed nothing valuable enough to warrant an attack, just industrial alcohol and everyday goods. No pirate would have risked boarding a potential fire hazard to steal such mundane items, then meticulously preserve the ship afterward. Science points to a simpler, grimmer truth. The crew likely evacuated into a stormy sea based on a false alarm, their lifeboat swallowed by waves while the ironically unharmed Celeste sailed on without them. What makes this mystery endure isn't some grand conspiracy, it's the chilling universality of human error. The same instinct that saves lives today, erring on the side of caution, might have doomed those sailors when faced with forces they couldn't comprehend. The Mary Celeste isn't a ghost story. It's a monument to how fear, when divorced from knowledge, can be the deadliest force of all. When divers first pulled a corroded bronze lump from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck near Antikythera in 1901, they assumed it was just another artifact lost to time. But beneath those layers of seabed grime lay history's most jaw-dropping technological secret, a precision-engineered device so advanced it shouldn't have existed for another 1,500 years. For decades, scholars puzzled over its fragmented gears, debating whether it was a navigational tool or an elaborate toy. Then modern science stepped in with microfocus CT scanners, peeling back centuries of corrosion like an archaeologist's X-ray vision. The scans revealed an intricate clockwork universe frozen in bronze. Interlocking gears with teeth cut to exacting mathematical ratios, dials marked with ancient Greek zodiac signs, and tiny pointers tracking celestial movements. Researchers painstakingly reconstructed the mechanism in 3D, mapping each gear's function. The results rewrote history. This wasn't just a calculator, it was a portable cosmos. One gear train predicted lunar phases with staggering accuracy, while another modeled the irregular orbit of Mercury, accounting for what ancient Greeks called its wandering path. Most astonishing, a differential gear, a component thought invented in the 16th century that calculated the moon's position by compensating for elliptical orbits. But the real revelation came when scientists realized the device didn't just track celestial events, it orchestrated them like a celestial symphony. Inscriptions deciphered from its fragments contained instructions for timing the Olympic Games based on planetary alignments, while other dials forecast eclipses down to the hour. This wasn't merely a scientific instrument, it was a cultural touchstone, blending astronomy, religion, and civic life. The ancients didn't just observe the heavens, they encoded their rhythms into bronze, turning cosmic patterns into a tangible, turning reality. What makes the Antikythera Mechanism truly humbling isn't just its engineering, it's the realization that our ancestors' curiosity mirrored our own. 2 millennia before silicon chips, they crafted a machine to decode the universe's secrets, proving human ingenuity has always reached for the stars. The mechanism's silent gears still whisper a challenge across time. how much of our modern knowledge might just be rediscovery, stretching across Peru's Nazca Desert like a colossal sketchbook left open to the heavens. These ancient geoglyphs have baffled researchers for generations. How could a civilization without flight or modern tools craft precise, sprawling designs, some stretching over 600 feet, visible only from the air? For decades, wild theories flourished, from alien interventions to lost technologies. But when scientists armed with drones and spectral imaging turned their gaze to the desert floor, they uncovered a truth far more remarkable. The Nazca people didn't need magic. They had something better: ingenious simplicity and an intimate understanding of their environment. High-resolution drone mapping revealed the secret hiding in plain sight. The lines weren't carved into the earth but scraped clean. The Nazca Desert surface is coated with a layer of dark, iron-rich pebbles, while beneath lies lighter-colored subsoil. By removing just the top few inches of stones, the creators produced stark visual contrasts that endured for millennia. But here's the twist: sediment analysis showed they didn't use elaborate tools. Archaeologists found remnants of wooden stakes and frayed ropes at key points, suggesting teams worked like surveyors, stretching cords between markers to maintain perfect proportions. The largest designs, like the iconic hummingbird or spider, likely started as small-scale models, scaled up using grids, a technique still taught in art classes today. Even more fascinating, the desert itself played collaborator. Wind tunnel tests proved the region's unique microclimate preserves the lines naturally. With less than an inch of rain annually and a stable layer of morning dew that hardens the soil, the geoglyphs faced minimal erosion. The Nazca didn't fight their environment, they harnessed it, turning the desert into a permanent canvas. But the real revelation came when researchers analyzed the soil's magnetic properties. Along the lines, they detected subtle disturbances, footprints, essentially left by ritual processions. Combined with pottery shards depicting ceremonies, a new theory emerged. These weren't just artworks, but sacred pathways for spiritual journeys, meant to be walked as much as seen. The drone's eye view we marvel at today might have been secondary, a divine perspective reserved for the gods, while the true experience was grounded, tactile, human. Science didn't just solve how the lines were made, it revealed why. In stripping away alien theories, we found something more profound, a testament to how observation, patience, and reverence for the land can create wonders that outlast empires. The Nazca didn't need extraterrestrial help. They had everything they needed right beneath their feet. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has captivated believers and skeptics alike, a length of linen bearing the ghostly imprint of a crucified man, revered by some as the burial cloth of Christ. Its very fibers seemed to whisper of divine mystery, until science turned its gaze upon the ancient fabric in the late 20th century. The moment of truth came when researchers deployed radiocarbon dating, a technique that measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes to determine an object's age. 3 independent labs received postage stamp-sized samples, each meticulously cleaned of contaminants. The results sent shockwaves through the religious and scientific communities. The flax fibers dated between 1260 and 1390, squarely in the medieval period, over a millennium after Jesus' crucifixion. Yet the story doesn't end there. Textile specialists examining the shroud's weave made an unexpected discovery. The herringbone pattern was indeed consistent with first-century Palestinian burial cloths, but the thread count was unusually high, a feature more typical of later medieval European craftsmanship. Even more telling were traces of red ochre and tempera paint pigments found in microscopic analysis, materials common to 14th century artists. To some, this seemed like irrefutable evidence of fabrication. But then came the curveballs. Chemical studies revealed something peculiar. The image itself contains no pigment. Instead, it's a superficial discoloration of the outermost fibers, as if the cloth underwent a rapid, localized chemical reaction. something no known medieval technique could replicate. Forensic analysis deepened the puzzle. The bloodstains, when examined under ultraviolet light, show characteristics of real trauma, with serum halos and hemoglobin patterns matching crucified victims. How could a medieval forger have faked forensic details unknown to science until the modern era? The controversy took another turn when researchers noted potential anomalies in the carbon dating samples. The tested area might have been a medieval repair, a patch woven into the original fabric, skewing results. Recent microscopic imaging reveals subtle differences in weave density between the sampled section and the rest of the shroud. Could the original cloth still hide an older secret beneath the scrutiny of today's technology? What makes the Shroud of Turin endure isn't just the question of its origin, but the uncomfortable space it occupies between faith and proof. Science has peeled back layers, yet each answer seems to birth new questions, a reminder that some mysteries resist even our sharpest tools. Whether medieval artifact or divine relic, the shroud challenges us to confront how much we still don't understand about the past and the limits of what evidence alone can reveal. Across northern Europe's peat bogs, time seems to stand still, especially for the hundreds of eerily preserved bodies pulled from their murky depths over the centuries. These aren't skeletonized remains, but fully intact corpses with skin, hair, and even facial expressions frozen in eerie detail. Some look so fresh, discoverers often mistake them for recent murder victims. For generations, their remarkable condition fueled speculation about curses or supernatural forces. But when biochemists analyzed the unique environment of these bogs, they uncovered preservation secrets more fascinating than any myth. The magic lies in peat's trifecta of chemical defenses. First, the water's acidity comparable to vinegar halts bacterial growth that normally decomposes flesh. Then there's sphagnum moss, which releases compounds called sphagnons that tan skin like leather, while simultaneously starving microbes of nutrients. But the real game changer is oxygen deprivation. As plants decay in these waterlogged graves, they suck all available oxygen from the environment, creating a sterile zone where even metal tools buried with the bodies emerge uncorroded after 2,000 years. Forensic analysis reveals an even darker twist. Many bog bodies show signs of violent deaths, throat slashes, crushed skulls, even ritual strangulation with twisted ropes still embedded in their necks. Toxicology adds another layer. Residues in their stomachs hint at last meals laced with hallucinogenic plants or toxic grains. This wasn't random preservation, it was deliberate placement in nature's perfect mortuary. The bogs didn't just happen to protect these bodies, they were chosen for their unique properties, turning chemistry into a sacred preservative. Perhaps most hauntingly, modern imaging has revealed details the naked eye could never see. CT scans of Toland Man, one of the most famous bog bodies, showed his brain shrunk but astonishingly intact, with folds and structures still recognizable. His last meal of porridge and fish remained in his stomach, preserved down to the individual grains. Science peeled back the peat's cloak to show us not just how these individuals died, but how they lived, what they ate, what ailments they suffered, even the calluses on their hands from daily labor. The bogs didn't just preserve flesh, they suspended entire lives in biochemical amber. What began as Iron Age rituals, whether sacrifices, executions, or sacred burials, became accidental time capsules, gifting us faces from the past with unsettling immediacy. As one researcher put it, holding a bog body's hand isn't like touching an artifact. It's like shaking hands with history itself. Standing tall on England's Salisbury Plain, the towering Sarsens of Stonehenge have long stolen the spotlight, but it's the smaller, enigmatic blue stones that hide the site's most astonishing secret. These spotted dolerite and rhyolite pillars, some weighing over 4 tons, couldn't have come from the local chalk downs. For centuries, their origin was one of archaeology's greatest riddles. How did Neolithic builders without wheels or pack animals transport massive stones across what's now 140 miles of rugged terrain? The answer lay not in ancient maps or lost legends, but in the rocks themselves, specifically their chemical fingerprints. Geologists armed with portable X-ray fluorescence scanners took samples from the bluestones, analyzing their unique mineral signatures. The results pointed unequivocally to the Preseli Hills in Western Wales, where exposed outcrops bore identical ratios of zircon crystals and trace metals. But the real breakthrough came when researchers matched microscopic imperfections in the stones, tiny bubbles and fractures formed during volcanic cooling, to specific quarries like Carn Godog and Craig Rose Y Felin. These weren't just rough estimates. The science could pinpoint exact extraction sites within a few meters. Then came the logistical bombshell. Excavations at these Welsh quarries revealed something no one expected. The bluestones hadn't been hauled overland on an epic trek. Instead, archaeologists found Neolithic tool marks and makeshift loading ramps near ancient riverbeds that once connected to a network of waterways. Glacial ice sheets had carved these routes millennia earlier, leaving behind natural highways of interconnected streams and lakes. By radiocarbon dating burnt hazelnut shells left by workers, scientists reconstructed a startling picture. Teams likely rafted the stones along coastal waters during seasonal floods, then upriver toward Salisbury Plain. But here's the twist: the journey might not have been purely practical. Petrographic analysis revealed many bluestones were already cracked and weathered before transport, suggesting they weren't just raw materials. Some bore prehistoric cup marks, ritual carvings found at sacred Welsh sites, hinting these stones held spiritual significance long before Stonehenge existed. Isotope testing even traced some bluestones to ceremonial springs in the Preseli Hills, rich in folklore about healing. Science didn't just map a route, it revealed a pilgrimage. These weren't mere building blocks, they were relics hauled across landscapes both physical and mythical. The bluestones' journey wasn't just a feat of engineering, it was a testament to how deeply our ancestors wove geology, faith, and identity together. Every scrape and fracture in those Welsh quarries whispers the same truth: some distances can't be measured in miles alone. For all its fame, the Great Pyramid of Giza still guards its deepest secrets behind limestone blocks weighing tons. But modern science is finally cracking the code, not with chisels and dynamite, but with cosmic rays and heat signatures. When thermal scanners swept the pyramid's facade during a 2015 study, they detected something bizarre. 3 adjacent stones at the base were slightly warmer than the rest, as if hiding hollow spaces behind them. The anomaly was subtle, just a few degrees, but it sparked an international hunt for what might lie buried in history's most famous tomb. Enter muon radiography, a technique that sounds straight out of science fiction. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays collide with Earth's atmosphere, raining down constantly at nearly the speed of light. Crucially, they pass through solid matter, but denser materials absorb more particles. By placing muon detectors inside the pyramid's corridors, researchers could map voids like airport scanners revealing contraband in luggage. The scans exposed a massive hidden chamber above the Grand Gallery, spanning at least 100 feet, a space large enough to hold a commercial airliner. Even more intriguing, its purpose remains utterly mysterious. No passageways lead there, no inscriptions hint at its use. Some speculate it could be a construction gap relieving weight from the gallery below, while others whisper of undiscovered artifacts or even the pharaoh's true burial chamber. But the revelations didn't stop there. Infrared imaging pinpointed another oddity: thin, winding fissures snaking through the pyramid's core, too uniform to be cracks from settling. Engineers now believe these might be ancient air vents, part of a sophisticated climate control system regulating humidity to preserve delicate wall paintings and organic materials. The precision is staggering. The southern shaft aligns perfectly with the star Sirius, while the northern one targets the circumpolar stars, suggesting the builders blended practicality with celestial worship. Perhaps the most humbling discovery came from microscopic analysis of the mortar between blocks. Samples contained traces of water and hydrated minerals, revealing the blocks might have been slid into place on wet sand, reducing friction dramatically. This simple trick, combined with laser scans showing the pyramid's near-perfect cardinal alignment, deviating just 1/15 of a degree, paints a picture of engineers rivaling modern talent. What began as a search for hidden rooms has become a masterclass in ancient ingenuity. The pyramid's voids aren't just architectural quirks, they're silent lessons in how a civilization without steel or pulleys outsmarted time itself. Every scan, every thermal image peels back another layer of a 4,000-year-old puzzle, proving that even our most advanced tools are just catching up to their brilliance. For decades, the Dead Sea Scrolls existed in scholarly limbo. These 2,000-year-old manuscripts contained some of the oldest biblical texts ever found, yet their origins remained frustratingly opaque. Who transcribed these sacred words? Were they the work of solitary monks or entire communities? The answer lay hidden not in the ink, but in the very animal skins they were written on and the unique quirks of the scribe's handwriting. Modern science turned to two unexpected tools to crack the case: forensic handwriting analysis and cutting-edge DNA sequencing. First, researchers digitized every stroke of the scrolls, using algorithms to analyze pen pressure, letter spacing, and stroke angles, the equivalent of a linguistic fingerprint. The patterns revealed something astonishing. At least 500 separate scribble hands contributed to the texts. Some scrolls showed abrupt shifts in handwriting mid-sentence, suggesting teams of scribes working in shifts, passing the pen like a relay baton. One particularly fascinating example is the Great Isaiah Scroll, where subtle variations in the Hebrew letter, Aleph, exposed two distinct scribes seamlessly alternating sections, their styles so harmonized it took AI to spot the switch. But the real breakthrough came from the parchment itself. Geneticists extracted collagen from the animal skins, sequencing DNA from the flocks that provided the vellum. The results painted a vivid picture of the scroll's origins. Some parchments matched sheep breeds local to the Dead Sea region, while others came from distant herds, proof of a sprawling network trading materials across ancient Judea. Even more telling, ink residue analysis linked specific mineral compositions to individual scribble schools, tracing some scrolls back to Jerusalem workshops before their eventual deposit in the Qumran caves. Perhaps most dramatic was the discovery of a parchment with DNA matching the Temple Scroll, one of the most beautifully preserved texts. The animal's genetic signature aligned with flocks bred near the Mount Zion area. Strong evidence this scroll may have originated within Jerusalem's priestly elite before being hidden away during political upheaval. What began as a quest to identify scribes became a window into an entire cultural ecosystem. These weren't just isolated monks copying texts, they were part of a vibrant, connected world of scholars, traders, and artisans, all collaborating to preserve their heritage under the shadow of Roman conquest. The scroll's survival wasn't just luck, it was the work of countless hands, human and animal alike, each leaving invisible marks that science has only now learned to read. The Salem witch trials have long stood as a chilling reminder of how fear and superstition can spiral into tragedy. But what if science could trace that hysteria back to something as ordinary as a loaf of bread? In the 1690s, the same damp fields that fed colonial Massachusetts may have secretly poisoned its people. Enter ergotism, a condition caused by the fungus Claviceps purpurea, which infects rye grain under specific conditions. When ingested, this mold produces alkaloids closely related to LSD, triggering convulsions, burning sensations, and vivid hallucinations, symptoms eerily mirroring the afflictions described by Salem's accusers. Forensic botanists examining historical climate records found a smoking gun. The years leading up to the trials saw unusually wet springs followed by hot summers, the perfect recipe for ergot proliferation. Grain storage practices of the era compounded the risk. Damp rye kept in poorly ventilated barns would have allowed the fungus to thrive, even more compelling. Ergot's effects align disturbingly well with trial testimonies. Victims described feeling pinched by invisible specters, a sensation matching ergotism's peripheral vasoconstriction, which starves limbs of blood. The fits of the afflicted, with their spasms and thrashing, mirror documented cases of ergot poisoning in medieval Europe, but the science doesn't stop at symptoms. Chemical analysis of Salem's soil reveals high iron content, which studies show can amplify ergot's toxicity. Researchers also note a curious pattern. Accusations clustered in areas with the most waterlogged fields, while drier upland communities remained relatively unscathed. The Putnam family, whose daughter was among the first accusers, lived near swampy lowlands notorious for fungal growth. Critics argue that ergotism doesn't explain the trial's social dynamics, why certain individuals were targeted, or why the hysteria spread beyond immediate poisoning victims. Yet modern neuroscience offers a possible bridge. Ergot's psychoactive compounds can induce paranoid delusions, potentially heightening existing Puritan fears of the supernatural. In a community already primed to see Satan's hand everywhere, a bad harvest might have been the spark that lit the fire. What makes this theory so haunting isn't just the idea of a biological trigger, it's the realization that Salem's tragedy could have begun not with malice but with mycelium. Science peels back layers of time to show us how easily nature's quiet chemistry can twist into human calamity. The witch trials may live in history as a parable of fear, but beneath the surface, they're also a reminder. Sometimes the darkest chapters begin with something as small as a spore. The legend of the crystal skulls reads like an artifact straight out of Indiana Jones' mysterious, translucent carvings allegedly crafted by ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, imbued with lost knowledge and supernatural powers. Museums and collectors proudly displayed them as relics of Aztec or Mayan craftsmanship, their smooth surfaces and uncanny detail seeming to whisper of forgotten artistry. But when scientists trained modern spectroscopes on these enigmatic objects, the beams of light bouncing back told a very different story, one of 19th century workshops, not pre-Columbian temples. High-powered magnification and scanning electron microscopes exposed telltale marks invisible to the naked eye, perfectly symmetrical grooves made by rotary wheels, a technology the Aztecs and Maya never possessed. Even more damning, residue analysis revealed traces of industrial-grade abrasives like corundum, materials only available after the Industrial Revolution. The skull's surfaces showed polishing patterns consistent with jewelers' tools from Victorian-era Europe, not the handheld stone and reed drills used by ancient Mesoamerican artisans. But the real smoking gun came from hydrofluoric acid tests. Authentic pre-Columbian crystal artifacts develop a distinctive patina over centuries due to microscopic weathering. The skulls, by contrast, showed unnaturally uniform surfaces with artificially induced age marks that fluoresced under ultraviolet light, a clear sign of chemical treatments designed to mimic antiquity. One particularly famous skull, the Mitchell Hedges specimen long touted as the most flawless example, was found to have optical properties matching Brazilian quartz, a material never used by Mesoamerican lapidaries. Perhaps most telling of all was the paper trail. Archivists digging through 19th century customs records uncovered shipments of uncarved quartz blocks from Brazil to Idar Oberstein, Germany, a town renowned for its gem-cutting workshops. Bills of sale even listed Mexican curiosities among the finished goods exported to collectors hungry for exotic artifacts. The skulls weren't ancient relics smuggled out of jungles. They were tailor-made souvenirs crafted to feed Europe's obsession with the mystical Orient and the Americas. What makes this revelation so compelling isn't just the debunking of a myth. It's the insight into how easily Romanticism can rewrite history. The skull's allure says more about our own desires than the past's realities, the longing for lost civilizations, the thrill of the unexplained. Science didn't just expose a fraud, it held up a mirror to our collective imagination, showing how often we see what we wish to find. The crystal skulls may not be ancient, but their story of craftsmanship, commerce, and human fascination is every bit as revealing as any artifact. When the Vinland map surfaced in 1957, it sent shockwaves through the historical community. A parchment allegedly drawn in the 1500s depicting Norse settlements in North America centuries before Columbus. Here was tangible proof that Viking sagas about Vinland weren't just legends but documented reality. The map's allure was irresistible, its implications revolutionary. That is, until science took a closer look at the ink. Advanced spectroscopy revealed the first red flag, traces of anatase, a synthetic titanium dioxide compound. While titanium occurs naturally, this particular crystalline form wasn't produced industrially until the 1920s. Even more damning, X-ray fluorescence scans showed the ink penetrated the parchment's fibers unnaturally, without the feathering or fading expected from centuries of aging. Authentic medieval inks, made from gallnuts and iron salts, leave distinct chemical signatures as they degrade, forming telltale halos around strokes. The Vinland map's lines were suspiciously crisp, as if applied recently. Then came the radiocarbon dating. When researchers tested the parchment itself, the results placed it firmly between 1420 and 1440, consistent with its claimed age. But this only deepened the mystery. Why would a genuine medieval parchment bear modern ink? The answer lay in the cleverness of the forgery. Someone had acquired authentic blank vellum, likely from a disassembled medieval book, then carefully drawn their deceptive masterpiece. The final nail in the coffin emerged from linguistic analysis. The map's Latin inscriptions contained subtle anachronisms, like the word drager for Viking ships, a term popularized by 19th-century Norse revivalists unknown to actual medieval cartographers. Even the wormholes told a story. Microscopic examination showed they'd been artificially added, with holes punched through both ink and parchment in patterns that matched 19th-century bookbinding practices, not natural insect damage. What makes the Vinland map fascinating isn't just the forgery's exposure, but its lingering paradox. The Norse did reach North America, as confirmed by archaeology at Elant's Oaks Meadows. The map's central claim was right, just not its provenance. In trying to prove history, the forger underestimated how thoroughly science would one day scrutinize their handiwork. The Vinland map endures as a cautionary tale. Even the most convincing lies crumble under the weight of evidence, while truth needs no forgery to endure. Oak Island's so-called money pit has taunted treasure hunters for over 200 years, a deep, booby-trapped shaft where cadaver dogs whimper at the scent of centuries-old decay, where drill bits bring up strands of gold chain and scraps of parchment. Legends whisper of pirate gold, Templar relics, even Shakespeare's lost manuscripts. But when geologists turned ground-penetrating radar onto the island, they uncovered a truth far stranger than fiction. Nature itself engineered this elaborate riddle. The scans revealed a hidden labyrinth beneath the island's surface, not man-made tunnels, but a network of sinkholes and natural cavities carved by an ancient glacial river. These voids act like geological Swiss cheese, collapsing unpredictably as seawater infiltrates through porous limestone. What treasure hunters interpreted as flood tunnels designed to protect loot. They're actually tidal bores where ocean water rushes in during high tide, filling the pits with swirling currents. Drill core samples showed layers of coconut fiber, and would once thought to be pirate-made filters are just debris washed in from the bay, tangled by the same forces that strand seaweed on beaches. But the real twist came when researchers analyzed the infamous metal detection hits. Spectrometry revealed the glinting fragments weren't Spanish doubloons or Templar swords, but pyrite nodules fool's gold that forms naturally in sulfur-rich environments. Even the parchment scraps tell a different story under microscopic examination. Instead of encrypted treasure maps, they're fragments of livestock records from 18th century settlers, likely discarded into the pit as trash. Perhaps most damning is the carbon dating. Wooden structures in the shaft, long touted as proof of pirate engineering, date to the 1790s, a century after Captain Kidd's era. The ancient oak platforms, they're shipbuilding offcuts from Nova Scotian lumber mills. Even the famed 90-foot stone, supposedly engraved with cryptic symbols, vanished before proper analysis, but surviving sketches match mortar markers used in colonial-era property disputes. The money pit isn't a chest waiting to be opened, it's a geological magic trick perfected over millennia. Every collapse refills the shaft with new clues. Every storm washes in fresh debris, and every generation's desperation rewrites the legend. Science hasn't just debunked a treasure hunt, it's revealed how easily erosion and human imagination can conspire to create the perfect mystery. Deep in China's Taklamakan Desert, the Tarim mummies lay undisturbed for millennia, their strikingly Caucasian features frozen in time, their felt garments and woven textiles perfectly preserved by the arid sands. When archaeologists first uncovered these bodies in the 1980s, their vivid red hair, long noses, and patterned wool clothing seemed utterly out of place. How could individuals who looked like they'd walked straight out of Bronze Age Europe end up buried in the heart of Asia over 3,000 years ago? The mystery ignited fierce debates, with theories ranging from lost Roman legions to wandering Celtic tribes. But DNA testing would eventually rewrite the entire narrative, not with speculation, but with hard genetic evidence. Scientists extracted genetic material from the mummies' teeth and bones, sequencing genomes that spanned hundreds of generations. The results upended expectations. These individuals weren't recent migrants from the West at all. Instead, their ancestry traced back to an ancient population of Bronze Age herders known as the Afanasevo, who'd roamed the Siberian steppes over 5,000 years ago. Isotope analysis of their teeth confirmed something even more remarkable: they'd been born and raised right there in the Tarim Basin, despite their foreign features. This wasn't a case of European travelers getting lost. It was proof of an indigenous people whose lineage stretched back to a time when East and West were far more connected than we ever realized. The real surprise lay in the cultural clues buried with them. Their textiles, woven in twill patterns identical to those found in Scandinavia, hinted at shared weaving technologies across unimaginable distances. One mummy's felt hat bore uncanny resemblance to those worn by Scythian nomads thousands of miles away. Even their diet, reconstructed from residue in burial vessels, blended millet from the East and dairy products typical of Eurasian pastoralists. These weren't outsiders, they were the product of a world where borders didn't exist as we know them, where ideas, crafts, and genes flowed freely along the threads of ancient trade routes. Perhaps most astonishing was the revelation that their genetic profile contained no detectable mixing with neighboring populations. Unlike other groups in the region, the Tarim people remained genetically isolated for centuries, preserving their distinctive ancestry despite living at the crossroads of civilizations. The desert that safeguarded their bodies also safeguarded their lineage, creating a time capsule of a people who defy simple categorization. Science didn't just solve a mystery, it shattered assumptions about how cultures evolve. The Tarim mummies aren't anomalies, they're a testament to the untold complexity of human movement. Their faces, so out of place to modern eyes, are a reminder that identity has always been more fluid than geography suggests. In their silence, they speak volumes. The world was global long before we called it that. For centuries, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon ranked among the ancient world's undisputed wonders until historians stumbled upon an inconvenient truth. Not a single Babylonian source ever mentions them. The only detailed accounts come from Greek writers like Strabo and Diodorus, who described tiered terraces dripping with exotic plants, watered by intricate screw-powered irrigation. But recent breakthroughs in climate modeling and satellite archaeology are flipping the script entirely, pointing not to Babylon but to Nineveh 300 miles north. The first clue lies in the dirt specifically, the soil's ability to sustain lush gardens in a region where temperatures routinely scorch past 100 degrees. Hydrological studies of ancient Mesopotamia reveal Babylon's water table was astonishingly low, requiring backbreaking labor to lift water even with screw pumps. Nineveh, by contrast, sat near tributaries of the Tigris River with natural aquifers close to the surface. Satellite surveys using infrared imaging have detected the faint outlines of massive aqueducts and cisterns in Nineveh's ruins, infrastructure capable of feeding the garden's legendary thirst. One channel, when digitally reconstructed, aligns perfectly with a chain pump system described by Greek historians. Then there's the climate whodunit. Dendrochronologists analyzing ancient cedar beams from Assyrian palaces made a startling correlation. Tree rings from Nineveh's heyday show unusually wet years, ideal for cultivating the garden's fabled cedars and aromatic shrubs. Babylon's contemporaneous records, however, note droughts so severe they triggered grain riots. Even more damning, cuneiform tablets from Nineveh boast of King Sennacherib's unrivaled palace garden, complete with water lifted to the heights. One inscription even details bronze screws used to raise river water, a dead ringer for the Greek descriptions. The plot thickens with architectural forensics. Babylon's flat, mud-brick terrain would have required staggering engineering to support tiered gardens, yet excavations show no evidence of such structures. Nineveh, meanwhile, was built into natural hillsides, ready-made terraces for hanging gardens. Ground-penetrating radar recently revealed the footprint of a gargantuan elevated garden complex near Sennacherib's palace, complete with root cavities from foreign plant species. Perhaps the most poetic twist comes from linguistic archaeology. Early Greek writers often conflated Assyria and Babylon, using the terms interchangeably. Over centuries of retelling, Sennacherib's masterpiece may have migrated south in the collective imagination, grafted onto Babylon's more famous ruins. The gardens weren't lost, they'd simply been misplaced by history. What began as a question of location unraveled into something far richer, a lesson in how even the most enduring legends can drift from their roots. The hanging gardens might not have hung where we thought, but their rediscovery in Nineveh's dust proves truth doesn't just hide in ruins. It grows there, waiting for science to prune away the myths. For generations, the murky depths of Scotland's Loch Ness have fueled speculation about a prehistoric survivor lurking beneath the waves, a long-necked plesios, or somehow evading extinction for 66 million years. But when scientists conducted the most comprehensive environmental DNA survey of the loch in 2019, they weren't hunting monsters. They were cataloging every trace of life left behind in scales, skin cells, and organic debris. The results didn't just challenge Nessie's legend, they rewrote it with something far more surprising swimming in the data. Over 250 water samples collected from across the loch underwent genetic sequencing, creating a biological snapshot of every creature calling the lake home. The analysis ruled out Jurassic holdouts categorically. No reptilian DNA matched marine fossils or living relatives like sea turtles. But one genetic signature appeared in overwhelming abundance: European eels, some carrying markers suggesting extraordinary size. These weren't your average river eels. Their DNA hinted at individuals potentially reaching lengths of 12 to 15 feet, triple the size of typical adults. The eel theory suddenly clicked with centuries of eyewitness accounts, descriptions of undulating, serpentine shapes aligning perfectly with the sinuous movement of mature conger eels. Sonar anomalies once attributed to a singular massive creature could instead be swirling congregations of these elongated fish. Even the famous surgeon's photograph, the 1934 image that cemented Nessie's long-necked silhouette, has been scrutinized by marine biologists who note its proportions eerily match a diving eel's wake. But how do eels grow so large in Loch Ness? The answer lies in the lake's unique ecology. Unlike most freshwater bodies, the loch's frigid, nutrient-rich depths slow eel metabolism dramatically, potentially extending their lifespan decades beyond normal limits. Without the hormonal triggers that normally drive migration and spawning, some individuals might simply keep growing, becoming leviathans in isolation. The real twist, ancient Highland folklore might have known all along. Local legends predating the Nessie phenomenon speak of the each-uish, shape-shifting water spirits often taking eel-like forms. Science didn't debunk the mystery, it reframed it, showing how easily nature's ordinary wonders can morph into extraordinary myths when viewed through the rippling lens of deep, dark water. The loch's true monster isn't a dinosaur, it's the endless human capacity to see magic in the unexplained. For decades, the Zodiac killer's taunting ciphers lay scattered across history like shattered glass, each piece a potential clue, yet none forming a complete picture. Between 1968 and 1969, this infamous serial murderer sent 4 coded messages to California newspapers, boasting about his crimes and daring authorities to catch him. 3 remained stubbornly unbroken, their secrets locked behind layers of complex substitution and symbols. But in 2020, something extraordinary happened. A team of codebreakers armed with artificial intelligence and old-fashioned persistence finally cracked one of the most infamous puzzles in criminal history, the 340-character cipher known as Z340. The breakthrough came from an unlikely collaboration between a retired naval cryptographer, a mathematician obsessed with puzzles, and a machine learning algorithm trained on thousands of historical ciphers. Previous attempts had failed because the Zodiac didn't rely on standard encryption methods. Instead, he twisted multiple systems together, symbols representing letters, letters standing for other letters, even words buried within words like nesting dolls. Traditional code-breaking techniques hit dead ends, but AI changed the game. The algorithm, designed to recognize patterns invisible to the human eye, detected something startling. The killer had reused symbols inconsistently, sometimes assigning multiple meanings to the same character. This wasn't a clean cipher, it was a messy, improvisational scramble likely designed to frustrate decryption. Painstakingly, the team reconstructed the Zodiac's chaotic logic. One segment read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me." Another chilling line confessed, "That wasn't me on the TV show," referencing a popular program that had dramatized his crimes. Yet despite the decryption, the message offered no names, no locations, just the killer's trademark gloating. Even with modern technology peeling back one layer, the Zodiac's true identity remains as shrouded as ever. But the hunt isn't over. Forensic linguists are now employing computational stylometry, analyzing the killer's word choices, sentence structures, and even punctuation quirks to compare against digitized archives of suspect writings. Meanwhile, genetic genealogists are re-examining envelopes and stamps for trace DNA, hoping to apply the same techniques that solved the Golden State Killer case. What makes the Zodiac ciphers endure isn't just the mystery, it's the unnerving realization that even in our age of artificial intelligence and genetic fingerprinting, some shadows still linger just beyond the light. The codes were never just about hiding information, they were a psychological weapon, a way to immortalize fear, and in that, at least, the Zodiac succeeded. But science hasn't surrendered. Every cracked symbol is another step toward the day when one of history's most elusive killers finally runs out of places to hide. On June 30th, 1908, a fireball streaked across the Siberian sky with the brilliance of a second sun, then exploded with a force 200 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The Tunguska event flattened 80 million trees across 800 square miles, sending shock waves that circled the globe twice. For decades, conspiracy theories flourished. Secret Nikola Tesla experiments, a crashing alien spacecraft, even a tiny black hole tunneling through Earth. But when scientists finally reached the remote epicenter years later, they found no crater, no fragments, just a radial pattern of charred, uprooted trees pointing outward like spokes on a shattered wheel. The mystery lingered for generations until modern astronomy and forensic botany teamed up to crack the case. The first breakthrough came from asteroid trajectory modeling. By simulating thousands of possible cosmic trajectories, researchers pinpointed the culprit's origin, a stony asteroid roughly 60 meters wide, barreling in at 34,000 miles per hour. But here's where physics stepped in with a twist. Atmospheric entry models showed the rock never actually struck the ground. Instead, superheated air pressure caused it to detonate 5 miles above the Taiga, an airburst so violent it vaporized the asteroid instantly, leaving no traditional impact site. This explained the absence of meteorite fragments and matched eyewitness accounts of a towering column of fire followed by a deafening double blast. Tree rings told an even more startling story. Core samples from surviving Siberian pines revealed radioactive carbon-14 spikes in 1908 growth layers, evidence of intense neutron bombardment from the explosion. Chemical analysis of resin trapped in that year's rings showed elevated iridium and nickel, metals rare on Earth but abundant in certain asteroids. Most tellingly, the scorched but upright telegraph pole forest at ground zero displayed bark stripped in a precise downward pattern, consistent with a thermal pulse radiating from a single point high in the atmosphere. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source: Cold War infrasound data. Declassified nuclear test records allowed scientists to compare Tunguska's seismic and atmospheric signatures with known explosion types. The match was undeniable: the energy release, shockwave propagation, and even the infrasonic ringing of the upper atmosphere all aligned perfectly with a mid-air cosmic detonation. What began as one of history's great terrestrial whodunits turned out to be a catastrophic cosmic near-miss. Tunguska wasn't just a warning shot, it was a live demonstration of how vulnerable Earth remains to spaceborne threats. Those scorched Siberian trees stand as silent sentinels, reminding us that sometimes the most destructive forces aren't those that hit the ground but those that never get the chance. What if an ancient clay jar just 5 inches tall and packed with asphalt could rewrite the history of electricity? Found in 1936 near Baghdad, this unassuming artifact soon became known as the Baghdad Battery. Its construction seems suspiciously advanced: a copper cylinder wrapped around an iron rod, sealed inside a ceramic pot with traces of acidic residue. The implications were staggering had someone stumbled upon a 2,000-year-old power source. The debate that followed would pit experimental archaeology against traditional scholarship in a clash over how we view ancient technological ingenuity. Reconstructions by researchers like Willard Gray in the 1940s showed the jar could indeed produce a faint electric current when filled with vinegar or grape juice, weak but measurable around 1 volt. Electrochemists noted how the iron and copper components, submerged in an acidic electrolyte, mirrored the basic principles of a galvanic cell, even more compelling. Ancient Mesopotamian texts reference medical treatments involving electric fish, suggesting possible familiarity with bioelectric phenomena. Could this vessel have been an early medical device delivering mild shocks for pain relief? Skeptics countered fiercely. The lack of wiring or obvious electrodes made practical use unlikely, while the asphalt seal seemed better suited for preserving scrolls than conducting electricity. The battery might have been nothing more than a storage container for sacred texts, with the metal rod acting as a spindle for rolled parchment. But here's where materials science entered the fray. Spectrographic analysis revealed critical details. The copper showed deliberate alloying to resist corrosion, unusual for simple storage jars. Residue studies identified trace acids like citric or acetic substances known to accelerate electron transfer between metals. Most tellingly, similar artifacts from the same period have been found with residue patterns suggesting repeated liquid exposure, as if refilled over time. Yet the mystery deepens when you consider context. No archaeological site has ever yielded wires, bulbs, or other components that might indicate an electrical grid. Without a larger technological ecosystem, what purpose would isolated batteries serve? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between the extremes. Ancient artisans might have stumbled upon electrochemical effects without fully understanding them, using the jars for rituals or experiments lost to time. The Baghdad battery isn't just an artifact, it's a Rorschach test for how we view the past. Every analysis reveals less about the object itself and more about our own assumptions. Whether it powered temple miracles or stored temple scrolls, one thing is certain. Its creators were far more curious, far more inventive than we often give them credit for. And sometimes the most electrifying discoveries aren't about what we prove, but what we're forced to reconsider. High in the frozen reaches of the Indian Himalayas, Rupkund Lake hides a macabre secret: hundreds of ancient skeletons, their bones emerging from melting ice like a warning frozen in time. Locals called it Skeleton Lake, spinning tales of vengeful gods striking down blasphemous kings. But when scientists turned isotope analysis and forensic meteorology on these remains, the truth proved far more haunting. A disaster written not in myth, but in chemistry and bone fractures. The first clue came from the skeletons themselves. Radiocarbon dating placed their deaths around the year 850, but it was isotopic signatures in their teeth that told the real story. Oxygen isotope ratios revealed these weren't warriors or pilgrims from the Indian subcontinent. As long assumed, they'd grown up hundreds of miles apart. Some showed dietary markers typical of the Persian plateau, while others matched Southeast Asian coastal regions. DNA analysis added another layer. Many shared genetic ties to modern Greek and Cretan populations. This was no localized tragedy, it was a cosmopolitan group, perhaps traders or travelers caught in the wrong place at the worst possible moment. Then came the weather forensics. Climatologists reconstructed historical storm patterns using ice core samples from nearby glaciers. The data showed a terrifying scenario: a late monsoon season, when the Himalayas are notorious for sudden, violent hailstorms. But the smoking gun lay in the skulls themselves. Over 30% bore deep, concave fractures, not the clean lines of battle wounds, but the ragged, crater-like impacts characteristic of hailstones the size of cricket balls. Computer modeling matched these injuries to hail falling at terminal velocity, approximately 70 miles per hour. Imagine being caught in that open basin, with nowhere to run as fist-sized ice missiles rained down from the sky. The lake itself became an accomplice to the tragedy. Geological surveys revealed the basin's shallow depth and rocky floor would have amplified the hailstone's lethal force, creating a deadly ricochet effect. Many skeletons showed compound fractures on their arms and collarbones, instinctive protective injuries from people curling into futile defensive positions. Isotopic analysis of nearby soil layers added the final twist. A sudden temperature drop preserved the bodies in meltwater that quickly refroze, locking them in icy suspension until modern explorers stumbled upon the gruesome tableau. What makes Rupkund so chilling isn't just the scale of death, but its democratic brutality. Science peeled back the layers to show us not a mythic curse, but a random act of atmospheric violence that didn't care about nationality, status, or purpose. Those bones are a reminder that nature's indifference can be far more terrifying than any divine wrath. And sometimes the most profound historical mysteries aren't about why people died, but how astonishingly far they'd traveled just to meet the same brutal end. The towering moai of Easter Island have long been a magnet for wild theories. How could a society without wheels or heavy machinery carve and move nearly 900 massive stone statues, some weighing over 80 tons? For years, the sheer scale of this feat fueled speculation about lost technologies or even extraterrestrial assistance. But when archaeologists teamed up with modern engineers and traditional Rapa Nui carvers, they uncovered a brilliantly simple secret: the statues didn't need alien help. They could walk. Experimental archaeology took center stage in 2012, when researchers attempted to replicate ancient methods using nothing more than ropes and logs. Teams divided into pullers, working 3 thick hemp ropes attached to the statue's sides and base, while others stabilized the moai's forward tilt with a rear guide rope. With coordinated tugs, the teams found they could rock the statue side to side in a rhythmic sway, literally making it walk upright across the landscape. Video footage of these experiments is staggering. Multi-ton stone giants lumbering forward with each carefully timed pull, leaving behind the distinctive parallel grooves found in Easter Island's ancient roads. The motion mirrors the islanders' own oral traditions, which speak of the moai moving with the help of the mana, or spiritual power, but the real revelation came from physics. Strain gauges attached to the replicas showed that this method distributed weight so efficiently that just 18 people could maneuver a 10-ton statue at nearly 200 feet per hour. Laser scans of actual moai bases revealed telltale wear patterns, abraded edges, and concave footprints matching the experimental model's rocking motion. Even the island's scattered toppled statues, once assumed to be abandoned during transport, showed damage consistent with controlled descents gone slightly off balance. The most compelling evidence, though, lies in the landscape itself. LiDAR mapping uncovered something earlier surveys missed. The roads aren't flat but subtly terraced with raised centerlines. These weren't just paths, they were engineered tracks designed to accommodate the statue's swaying gait, with embankments preventing catastrophic falls. Soil analysis along these routes showed compacted layers alternating with loose gravel, a mix that would have reduced friction while providing just enough traction for the rocking motion. What began as an experiment became a powerful rebuke to the myth of primitive helplessness. The Rapa Nui didn't need supernatural intervention. They had something far more potent: ingenuity honed by generations of trial and error. Those towering faces aren't just monuments, they're testaments to human adaptability, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't machinery, but the collective knowledge of hands, ropes, and rhythm passed down through time. The moai's journey across the island wasn't a mystery. It was a masterpiece of physics and teamwork, written in stone and earth. The Bermuda Triangle has long been the stuff of nightmares for sailors and aviators, a stretch of ocean between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda where ships and planes allegedly vanish without a trace. Tales of compasses spinning wildly, electronic failures, and vessels disappearing into thin air have fueled theories of alien abductions, time warps, and even Atlantis rising. But when oceanographers and geophysicists turned their instruments toward these waters, they found explanations far more grounded and fascinating than any paranormal fantasy. The first clue lay hidden beneath the seabed. Sonar surveys revealed vast deposits of methane hydrates, ice-like formations where gas is trapped in frozen water molecules. When these pockets destabilize, often due to underwater landslides or temperature shifts, they release enormous bubbles of methane gas that rise toward the surface. Laboratory experiments simulating this phenomenon showed something startling. A ship floating above such a gas plume would lose buoyancy as the water beneath it literally turned frothy and less dense. In extreme cases, vessels could sink rapidly without distress calls, their wreckage scattered by deep currents before search teams arrived, even more chilling. These bubbles can affect aircraft too. As methane rises into the air, it creates localized pockets of low-density atmosphere that disrupt engine combustion and alter wing lift, potentially causing sudden crashes. Then there's the magnetic quirk that's been mistaken for supernatural interference. The Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align perfectly, a phenomenon called agonic line convergence. For navigators relying on compasses, this can cause confusion if they fail to adjust for the shift. Modern GPS has rendered this moot, but in the mid-20th century, when many disappearances occurred, even slight miscalculations could send planes or ships fatally off course into the vast Atlantic. Satellite imagery added another layer to the puzzle. This region sits at the crossroads of the Gulf Stream's powerful currents, where warm and cold waters collide, creating sudden rogue waves and microstorms that don't appear on broader weather radar. Combine that with the area's status as one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, where human error, mechanical failure, and heavy traffic statistically increase accident rates, and the mystery starts to unravel. The Bermuda Triangle's greatest trick wasn't swallowing ships whole. It was convincing us that science couldn't explain what was really just a perfect storm of geology, physics, and probability. The truth isn't less intriguing than the myths, it's just far more instructive. Those vanished crews weren't victims of cosmic forces. They were reminders of how much we still have to learn about the forces right here on Earth. And sometimes the scariest monsters aren't lurking in the unknown, they're hiding in plain sight, disguised as bubbles, magnets, and waves. From vanished colonies to dancing plagues, from ghost ships to geoglyphs, what began as 25 of history's greatest enigmas have unraveled under the relentless gaze of modern science. Each breakthrough reminds us that the line between myth and reality is thinner than we think, and that the tools of our age, whether muon scanners, DNA sequencing, or artificial intelligence, are becoming the torches that light up history's darkest corners. The past isn't just a static record, it's a living puzzle waiting for the right moment, the right technology to reveal its secrets. Take a step back and you'll see the bigger picture. The Winchester Mystery House wasn't built for ghosts, but for a grieving woman's restless hands. The Tarim mummies weren't lost Europeans, but evidence of a world far more connected than ancient maps suggested. Even the Bermuda Triangle's vanishing ships owe more to methane bubbles and magnetic quirks than to any supernatural force. Time and again, science doesn't just debunk legends, it replaces them with truths more extraordinary than fiction. Who could have imagined that the key to Easter Island's walking statues lay not in alien intervention, but in the simple physics of ropes and rhythmic teamwork? Yet for every mystery solved, a dozen more linger. The Shroud of Turin's carbon dating clashes with its inexplicable image formation. The Baghdad battery's purpose remains tantalizingly unclear. And deep in Loch Ness, oversized eels still swim through the shadows of our imagination. That's the thrill of it all. History isn't a closed book, but a manuscript with pages still being written. Tomorrow's tools might decipher Voynich's final passages or pinpoint the Hanging Garden's true location. The next breakthrough could be lurking in a lab right now, waiting for its moment. So here's the real question: which mystery captivates you? The Zodiac's unsolved ciphers, the Antikythera Mechanism's lost blueprints? Drop your pick in the comments, because the conversation doesn't end here. If you've enjoyed this journey through science's greatest detective stories, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell. The past isn't done surprising us, and neither are we. Until the next revelation, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, every legend holds a kernel of truth. You just have to know where to look.